Raymond Cole was 38 years old, and 3 weeks earlier he had given his wife's mother a kidney to save her life. Not because anyone asked him twice, not because he needed the credit, because that was the kind of man Raymond Cole was, the kind who shows up completely, every time, no matter the cost. He was still recovering in that hospital bed when the door swung open. Diana walked in wearing a dress he had never seen, and one step behind her, close enough that it said everything, was a man in a tailored suit. His hand rested briefly on the small of her back, then stopped, because Diana had just seen her husband sitting upright, wide awake, looking directly at them both. She froze. Raymond said nothing for a long moment. He had just surrendered a piece of himself so her mother could live, and she had brought another man to watch him recover. What Raymond Cole did next, quietly, patiently, and without a single wasted move, she never saw coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The sterile fluorescent lights of Mercy General's pre-operative wing cast a harsh glow across the institutional green walls. Raymond Cole sat upright on the edge of his hospital bed, already changed into the thin paper gown that made everyone equal in these moments. His large hands, usually busy with logistics reports or home improvement projects, rested calmly in his lap. A young nurse moved efficiently around him, checking vital signs and marking things on her tablet. "Blood pressure is good, Mr. Cole," she said with practiced cheerfulness. "You're in excellent health for this procedure." Raymond nodded, his mind drifting to the stack of freight routing schedules he'd organized before taking medical leave. He'd spent 15 years building his career from entry-level warehouse work to operations management. Everything in his life had been constructed the same way: careful planning, consistent effort, steady progress toward clear goals. Diana's face appeared in the doorway, her eyes already glossy with emotion. She rushed to his bedside, grabbing his hand. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, not for the first time. "Yes, I do," Raymond replied simply. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. Gloria was family. Family meant showing up when it mattered. He studied his wife's features, noting the subtle changes 7 years of marriage had brought. The sharp ambition in her eyes had grown harder somehow, less warm. She'd been working later, traveling more for her marketing role. Small distance had crept in like winter draft through window frames. The orderlies arrived with their transport gurney, efficient and practiced in their movements. Through the open door, Raymond could see Gloria being prepped in the room across the hall. She looked small in her own hospital gown, her usually vibrant presence dimmed by months of kidney failure. His mind wandered back 3 months to a Sunday morning when he'd been paying bills at the kitchen table. Diana's purse had spilled, and as he helped gather the scattered contents, he'd glimpsed an unfamiliar credit card statement. The name was hers, but the address wasn't their home. He'd handed it back without comment, choosing trust over suspicion. There had been other moments: her phone suddenly face down when he entered rooms, visits to his office that felt shorter and more performative, calls that went to voicemail during times she used to answer immediately. He'd noticed them all, filed them away, but hadn't wanted to assemble the puzzle they might form. The head surgeon stopped by for a final check, his manner direct but reassuring. "We'll take good care of both of you," he promised, reviewing Raymond's charts one last time. "The procedure should take about 3 hours." Raymond nodded, his calm unchanged. He'd researched everything about living donor kidney transplants: recovery times, success rates, potential complications. Knowledge was how he managed uncertainty. Diana squeezed his hand again, her expensive perfume sharp in the antiseptic air. "I'll be right here when you wake up," she promised. Something in her voice caught, like a door not quite closing. The orderlies began their final preparations, checking IV lines and monitoring equipment. Raymond looked across the hall again, catching Gloria's eye. She raised her hand in a small wave, her face a map of gratitude and worry. He remembered the day he'd told her he was a match. She'd broken down crying, telling him he was too good, that she didn't deserve such sacrifice. He'd simply hugged her, wondering why doing the right thing was so surprising to some people. "It's time, Mr. Cole," one of the orderlies said, beginning to unlock the bed's wheels. Raymond squeezed Gloria's hand as they passed her room, a quiet gesture of reassurance. The ceiling tiles slid past overhead as they wheeled him toward the operating room, the corridors growing quieter as they moved deeper into the surgical wing. The anesthesiologist met them at the OR doors, reviewing his final checks. "Just relax and count backward from 100, she instructed, adjusting the IV drip. Raymond felt the cool flow of medication begin. His last conscious thought was simple gratitude for having the means to help, for being strong enough to recover, for building a life stable enough to share. The lights above him blurred softly as he counted. 100, 99, 98. His breathing slowed, steady, and peaceful. The operating room sounds grew distant, then faded entirely as the anesthesia took hold. Raymond Cole slipped into unconsciousness, unaware of the currents already moving beneath the surface of his carefully constructed life. The afternoon sun slanted through the Venetian blinds of room 412, creating narrow stripes of light across Raymond's hospital bed. 3 weeks had passed since the surgery, and his body was healing well, the incision sites closing cleanly, his remaining kidney adjusting to its solo role. The doctors were pleased with his progress. Raymond sat propped against pillows, reading a logistics journal he'd brought from home. The room had taken on the lived-in quality of extended stays. Cards from colleagues lined the windowsill, his tablet charged on the bedside table, and a half-empty water pitcher sweated condensation nearby. The steady rhythm of hospital life continued outside his door. Nurses chatting at their station, the squeak of cartwheels, the distant chime of elevators. Raymond had grown accustomed to these sounds, just as he'd grown accustomed to the changing pattern of Diana's visits. She came daily, yes, but there was something mechanical about it now. The conversations felt rehearsed, her attention scattered. She checked her phone more than she checked on him. Small things, really. The kind of details that only someone who'd spent 7 years studying another person's habits would notice. Yesterday, she'd forgotten to bring the book he'd asked for. The first time in their marriage, she'd forgotten something he'd specifically requested. This morning, she'd called to say she'd be late visiting because of a work meeting. Her voice had that particular tone it got when she wasn't telling the whole truth. Raymond noted these things quietly, filing them away with the same methodical attention he brought to his professional life. The same attention that had helped him rise from warehouse worker to operations manager. The same focus that had built their life together, brick by careful brick. The wall clock showed 2:17 p.m. when the door swung open without a preliminary knock. Diana stepped in, wearing a deep blue dress Raymond had never seen before. It was more formal than her usual workwear, the kind of outfit chosen to make an impression. One step behind her, too close for professional distance, came a tall man in a precisely tailored charcoal suit. His presence filled the small room with expensive cologne and unstated assumptions. Raymond recognized him from company photos on Diana's laptop. Derek Okafor, her direct supervisor at the marketing firm. For a fraction of a second, Derek's hand rested on the small of Diana's back, a gesture of casual intimacy that spoke volumes. The moment Derek noticed Raymond was awake and alert, he quickly withdrew his hand, but the damage was done. The truth had declared itself in that single unconscious movement. Diana looked up, her practiced smile freezing as she met Raymond's steady gaze. Her entire body went still, like prey sensing a predator's attention. The confidence she'd walked in with evaporated instantly. Raymond did not shift his position on the bed. He did not raise his voice or clench his fists or give any outward sign of the seismic shift occurring beneath his calm exterior. He simply looked at Diana, then let his gaze move deliberately to Derek, then back to his wife. The silence in the room grew thick enough to choke on. The monitoring equipment continued its steady beeping, marking heartbeats that suddenly seemed very loud in the confined space. A cart rolled past in the hallway. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone rang at the nurse's station. Normal hospital sounds that now felt surreal, like background noise in a dream. Diana's hands moved restlessly, smoothing her dress, adjusting her purse strap. The nervous gestures of someone whose carefully constructed narrative was unraveling. Derek shifted his weight, his polished professional demeanor cracking slightly around the edges. "You must be lost," Raymond said quietly, his voice level and controlled. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Diana's body locked up completely, as if even breathing might shatter whatever fragile defense she was trying to construct. The air in the room grew dense and suffocating, heavy with unspoken accusations and undeniable revelations. "I think I need to rest now," Raymond continued, his tone unchanged. He watched them both with that same steady gaze, noting how quickly Derek retreated toward the door, how Diana's designer heels seemed to stick to the floor with each step she forced herself to take. The door clicked shut behind them. Raymond waited, counting his breaths until he was certain they were gone. Then he picked up his phone from the bedside table and pressed his brother's number on speed dial. "Terrence," he said when his brother answered. "Come up here. Bring a notepad." Terrence Cole arrived at Mercy General exactly 47 minutes after Raymond's call. He moved through the hospital corridors with military efficiency, the requested notepad tucked under one arm. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and the deliberate movements of someone trained to assess situations quickly, Terrence drew curious glances from the nursing staff. He found Raymond exactly as he'd left him 3 days ago, sitting up in bed, outwardly composed. But Terrence, who'd known his younger brother for all 38 years of Raymond's life, caught the slight tension in his jaw, the carefully controlled stillness of his hands. "Sit down," Raymond said, gesturing to the chair beside his bed. "This might take a while." Terrence pulled out the notepad and settled in. He didn't interrupt as Raymond methodically laid out what had happened. Diana's entrance, Derek's revealing gesture, the suffocating silence that followed. Raymond described it all with the precise detail of someone who'd already replayed the scene multiple times in his mind, analyzing each component. When Raymond finished, the room fell quiet, except for the steady rhythm of monitoring equipment. Terrence studied his brother's face, noting the controlled breath, the measured calm. Finally, he asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want to do?" Raymond's response came without hesitation, each word carefully chosen. "I want to know everything first. Then decide." Terrence nodded once, already mentally cataloging resources. His private contracting work had given him access to networks of investigators and data analysts who operated efficiently and discreetly. "Give me 48 hours, he said, making initial notes. "I'll need Diana's full name, Derek's full name, and any details about where they work." Raymond provided the information with mechanical precision. Diana Cole, née Whitfield. Derek Okafor. Meridian Marketing Group, where Diana had worked for the past 3 years, and Derek served as division vice president. Over the next 2 days, Terrence worked his connections while Raymond maintained his routine in the hospital. Physical therapy, medication schedules, brief conversations with nurses. Diana visited each morning, her performance of concern growing more elaborate, as if trying to compensate for something she didn't know Raymond had already seen. 48 hours later, Terrence returned with a manila folder containing carefully organized documentation. He laid out the facts like coordinates on a map. Derek Okafor was indeed Diana's direct superior, overseeing her entire division at Meridian. Cross-referencing travel records showed they had attended the same out-of-town conferences 3 times in the past 8 months. Hotel charges appeared on a credit card Raymond had never known existed, opened in Diana's name, linked to an email address separate from their shared accounts. The timeline emerged with devastating clarity. The first hotel charge dated back 14 months, well before Gloria's kidney failure, before Raymond had even been tested as a potential donor. While he was still working overtime to build their future, Diana had already begun dismantling it. That night, alone in his hospital room, Raymond absorbed the full weight of this knowledge. He thought about lying in pre-op, squeezing Gloria's hand, believing he was strengthening family bonds through his sacrifice. He remembered Diana's tears of gratitude, now revealed as performance rather than truth. The monitoring equipment tracked his heart rate as it remained steady, betraying nothing of the internal recognition that the woman he'd married had already emotionally vacated their marriage while he was offering up an organ to save her mother's life. The next morning, Diana arrived at her usual time, carrying coffee she'd bought from the hospital cafe. She perched on the edge of his bed, asked about his pain levels, touched his hand with practiced concern. "I love you," Raymond told her, meaning the part that used to be true, the memory of who she had been or who he had believed her to be. 3 days later, Raymond was discharged. Diana drove him home in careful silence, helped him settle into their bedroom, brought him water and medications with flawless attention to detail. She played the role of devoted wife with the skill of someone who'd had 14 months to perfect the performance. Raymond watched her from behind steady eyes, noting every small gesture, every calculated expression of care. He said nothing about what he knew, nothing about the credit card statements or hotel charges or secret email address, nothing about the moment in the hospital room when truth had declared itself in Derek's casual touch. He had already decided what came next, but first, there was more to learn. Raymond pulled into his parking spot at Meridian Logistics 3 weeks before his medical leave was scheduled to end. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete as he straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, and walked toward the building with measured steps. His incision site still ached dully beneath his dress shirt, a constant reminder of what he'd given and what he'd learned. The office buzzed with surprised greetings as he made his way to his desk. "Ray, didn't expect you back so soon," called Marcus from accounting. "How's recovery going?" "Steady progress," Raymond replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He settled into his chair, powered up his computer, and began methodically working through 3 weeks of backlogged emails. Throughout the day, colleagues noticed something different about him. Jenny from operations paused mid-conversation during a status update, studying his face. Raymond had always been focused, but this was something else, a quiet intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. His responses were precise, his decisions quick and definitive. His supervisor, David Chen, stopped by his office around lunch. "You sure you're ready to be back?" "Medical leave is there for a reason." "I appreciate the concern," Raymond said, not looking up from his monitor. "But I work better when I'm working." The statement was simple, direct. David nodded slowly and left, unable to shake the feeling that something had shifted in his usually genial employee. At exactly 5 p.m., Raymond shut down his computer, collected his briefcase, and drove directly to the offices of Marsh & Associates, Family Law. The building was modest but well-maintained, reflecting Linda Marsh's reputation for efficiency over flash. He checked in with the receptionist and waited precisely 4 minutes before Linda emerged. "Mr. Cole," she said, extending her hand, "please come in." Linda's office was organized with military precision, files arranged perfectly, desk clear except for a legal pad and pen. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I appreciate you seeing me," Raymond began. "This is primarily informational at this stage. I need to understand my position." Linda nodded, already taking notes. "Tell me about the property first." Raymond laid out the facts with characteristic thoroughness. The house was in his name, purchased before marriage. Diana had contributed minimally to the mortgage payments, Preferring to focus on her career advance, he produced the original deed, property tax records, and mortgage statements, all meticulously organized. "And financial accounts?" Linda asked. Raymond withdrew the records Terrence had compiled, spreading them carefully across Linda's desk. Hotel receipt, credit card statements from an account he'd never known existed, conference registrations showing overlapping attendance. Linda reviewed each document, her expression unchanged. "How long have you been gathering this?" "2 weeks," Raymond replied. "But there's more." He pulled out additional bank statements, their joint accounts tracked over 14 months. Linda leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she followed the pattern Raymond had discovered. Small transfers, never more than $2,000, moved systematically into a separate account. The accumulated total, $23,400. "She's been building an exit fund," Linda observed. "Yes," Raymond said quietly. "While I was working overtime, while I was preparing to donate a kidney to her mother, she was planning her departure." Linda set down the statements and studied Raymond's face. "You understand your position is actually quite strong? The house predates the marriage. Her equity contribution is minimal. These financial records show systematic redirection of joint assets. A judge will take a very dim view of that." Raymond nodded once. "I understand, but I'm not ready to file yet. I need everything in place first." "Of course," Linda said. "We'll prepare thoroughly. In the meantime, maintain your routine. Document everything." That evening, Raymond sat across from Diana at their dining room table. Steam rose from the pasta she'd prepared, another performance of domestic normality. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice perfectly modulated. "Oh, busy," Diana replied, launching into a story about a challenging client meeting. "Derek thinks we might need to restructure the entire campaign." Raymond nodded, passed her the bread basket, watched her hands, the same hands that had signed transfer authorizations, siphoning their shared future into her private account. "Sounds stressful," he said. Later that night, in his home office, Raymond opened Terrence's folder on his laptop. He reviewed each photograph methodically. Diana and Derek entering hotels in 3 different cities. Receipt timestamps matching room service charges. Digital records of email exchanges they thought were hidden. He closed the laptop. The room fell into darkness except for a thin stripe of moonlight through the blinds. Raymond sat perfectly still, the weight of everything he now knew settling around him like a familiar coat. "All right, then," he said to the empty room. What Gloria couldn't hide. The autumn evening settled softly around Raymond and Diana's 2-story home as guests began arriving for the celebration dinner. Diana had insisted on hosting, calling it a recovery milestone gathering. Raymond watched from the kitchen window as cars filled their driveway. Gloria's silver sedan, Camille's SUV, the Hendersons from 2 doors down. He moved methodically through his cooking routine, the knife falling in perfect rhythm against the cutting board. Diana had offered to cater, but Raymond insisted on preparing everything himself. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, simple but executed with precision. His incision site barely bothered him anymore as he worked. "Can I help with anything?" Diana asked, touching his shoulder as she passed. Raymond noticed how she'd dressed carefully for the evening. The pearl earrings he'd given her 2 Christmases ago, a deep blue dress that matched the dining room walls. "I've got it handled," he replied, his voice warm and steady. "Why don't you greet everyone?" The house filled with the familiar sounds of arrival. Hugs in the foyer, ice clinking in glasses, conversation spilling from the living room. Raymond plated each dish with architectural care, laying out the spread on their formal dining table. Gloria arrived last, carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers. "For the table," she said, not quite meeting Raymond's eyes as she handed them over. He thanked her with the same gentle courtesy he'd always shown his mother-in-law, noting how her hands trembled slightly. Dinner unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Raymond at the head of the table, Diana to his right, their guests arranged around them. He played his role perfectly, the gracious host, the grateful patient, the man everyone had always known him to be. He poured wine, passed dishes, laughed at the right moments, but beneath his practiced warmth, Raymond watched, particularly Gloria. She sat across from him, between Camille and Tom Henderson, picking at her salmon with distracted movements. Every time Raymond spoke, her eyes would find him, filled with something that went beyond simple gratitude for the kidney that now filtered her blood. There was a heaviness there, a shadow that kept slipping past her social smile. "The doctors say his recovery is remarkable," Diana was saying, her hand resting briefly on Raymond's arm. "Though I wish he hadn't rushed back to work so soon." Gloria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully, reaching for her water glass with fingers that weren't quite steady. Later, as dishes were being cleared and Diana orchestrated cleanup in the kitchen, Raymond stepped out onto the back porch for air. The October night had turned cool, stars sharp above the maple trees that bordered their property. He heard the door open behind him. Gloria stood there, wrapped in the shawl she'd brought for the evening chill. Without speaking, she moved to stand beside him at the railing. Her hand found his in the darkness, gripping with surprising strength. "I don't deserve what you did," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The kidney. Any of it." Raymond turned to look at her profile, silvered by the security light. "Your family, Gloria. That's what family does." She squeezed his hand harder, almost painfully, and turned her face away. The gesture carried weight beyond the moment. Something like shame, something like grief. Raymond filed it away with the same quiet precision he'd been using to catalog everything these past weeks. 2 days later, he called Gloria from his office at lunch. "I thought we might get coffee," he said simply. "Just us." They met at Rosie's Diner, a quiet place off the main roads where the booths were spaced far enough apart for privacy. Gloria arrived looking like she hadn't slept well, ordering only black coffee when the waitress came by. Raymond waited until their cups were set down, steam rising between them like a curtain about to part. Then he looked directly at Gloria and asked, "How long have you known?" The cup rattled slightly against Gloria's saucer. Her face crumpled inward, aging 10 years in seconds. "6 months," she whispered. "Diana." I noticed something was different, the way she checked her phone, how she started staying late at work. I confronted her one night when she came by my house. She drew a shaking breath. She told me everything. About Derek, about their plans. Then she begged me not to say anything. Not while you were recovering. Not while everything was so delicate. She said she would handle it properly. At the right time. Gloria's voice broke. I told myself I was protecting both of you by staying quiet. My daughter, and the man who saved my life. What kind of mother am I? What kind of person? Raymond listened without movement, absorbing each word like he was recording them. When Gloria finally fell silent, tears tracking down her cheeks, he reached across the table and touched her hand once, very lightly. "Thank you for telling me now," he said quietly. He signaled the waitress, paid the check, and walked Gloria to her car. Her entire body seemed to cave inward as she got in, as if the truth leaving her had taken all her structural integrity with it. Raymond drove home in silence, the late afternoon sun slanting through his windshield. He did not call Diana. He did not mention the conversation, but he adjusted certain elements of his developing strategy, making mental notes about timing and presence. Gloria would not be a weapon in what was coming, but she would be there to witness it. What she chose to do with that moment would be entirely her choice. The front door burst open with unusual energy, startling Raymond from his evening paperwork. Diana swept into his home office, still in her work clothes, but radiating an excitement he hadn't seen in months. "Ray, you're not going to believe this," she said, perching on the edge of his desk. Her eyes sparkled with barely contained news. The most amazing opportunity just opened up. Raymond set down his pen carefully, giving her his full attention. Tell me about it. Regional director position in Atlanta. Full division oversight, significant bump in salary, relocation package, everything. The words tumbled out in a rush. Derek pulled me aside after the quarterly review meeting. He says I'm perfect for it. Raymond noticed how she said Derek's name without hesitation now, as if testing whether the sound of it would trigger any reaction. He kept his expression interested, but neutral. That's quite a step up. It's not just the position, Diana continued, standing to pace the small office. It's Atlanta itself. The culture, the food scene, the arts district. Remember how much we loved it when we visited 3 years ago? We could get a place in Buckhead. Maybe that high-rise development we walked past. You could transfer your logistics operations anywhere. Your company has offices there, right? Raymond leaned back in his chair, watching his wife paint their supposed future across the air between them. She'd clearly rehearsed this conversation, probably multiple times. Her hand gestures were too precise, her examples too ready. The schools are excellent, too, she added, then caught herself slightly. They'd been talking about starting a family before Gloria got sick, before everything. When would they need an answer? Raymond asked, his voice carrying just the right mix of practical concern and cautious optimism. 2 weeks for the initial commitment. The actual move would be in 3 months. Diana perched on his desk again, closer this time. I know it's sudden, but Ray, this could be exactly what we need. A fresh start. New energy. He reached for her hand, squeezed it gently. It sounds exciting, Diana. We should think about it carefully. Make sure we consider everything. Relief flooded her face. She'd expected resistance. Really? You're open to it? Of course. It's a significant opportunity. We should look at all the angles. He smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. Why don't you forward me the formal offer details when you get them? I'd love to review the package. Diana kissed his cheek and practically floated out of the office, already pulling out her phone, presumably to text Derek about Raymond's receptiveness. Raymond waited until her footsteps faded upstairs before reaching for his own phone. Terrence answered on the second ring. What's up? Diana just got offered a regional director position in Atlanta, in Derek's division. A low whistle from Terrence. Their exit strategy? Clean cover for relocation. Professional justification for them ending up in the same city. Raymond's voice was very quiet. Need you to make a call. What kind of call? The kind that looks into whether recent promotions in Derek's division followed proper HR protocols. The kind that asks if personal relationships influenced professional decisions. I know someone in corporate compliance who owes me, Terrence said. It'll be legitimate. Above board. Just asking the right questions to the right people. That's all I need. The call took 4 minutes. The effects took 4 days. First came the internal memo. A standard HR review of promotion practices across 3 divisions, including Derek's. Then the request for documentation of candidate selection processes. Then the freeze on all pending position changes until the review concluded. Diana came home the following Tuesday looking deflated. The Atlanta position is on administrative hold, she said, dropping her bag heavily by the door. Some kind of internal review. Derek says it could be weeks before anything moves forward. Raymond looked up from his laptop with carefully constructed concern. That's disappointing. Any idea what triggered the review? No one seems to know. It's just procedure. Diana's frustration was palpable. Derek's trying to push it through, but his hands are tied until HR clears everything. Raymond nodded sympathetically. These things happen in big companies. Bureaucracy moves at its own pace. That evening, after Diana went to bed early with a headache, Raymond drove to Linda Marsh's office. The lawyer was working late, as usual. She had his files ready on her desk. Everything's prepared, she said, sliding a thick folder across to him. The asset separation is clean, documented, and within all legal parameters. The filing can go forward whenever you're ready. Raymond reviewed the papers carefully. Every financial move was accounted for, every timeline verified. The house would remain his. The retirement accounts were protected. Diana's hidden fund transfers were detailed with brutal precision. 2 weeks from today, he said finally, closing the folder. I need one more piece in place first. Linda nodded, making a note in her calendar. Just let me know when you want me to file. Raymond stood, tucking the folder under his arm. The setting sun through Linda's office window cast long shadows across the carpet. Everything was moving exactly as it should. One piece remained. Raymond sat in his home office, the house quiet around him. Diana was at a late meeting, one of her increasingly frequent evening absences that he no longer questioned. The manila folder from Terrence's investigation lay open on his desk, illuminated by his desk lamp in the growing dusk. He lifted a single sheet containing Paulette Okafor's information, vice principal at Marshall Heights Elementary, mother to Justin and Marcus, ages 12 and 9, active in her church's youth ministry program. Married to Derek for 15 years. Her work number was listed clearly at the top of the page. Raymond checked his watch. 4:45 p.m. The school's main office would still be open. He picked up his phone and dialed deliberately, each number a conscious choice. Marshall Heights Elementary, how may I direct your call? The receptionist's voice was warm and professional. Paulette Okafor's office, please. May I ask who's calling? Raymond Cole. It's regarding a personal matter she needs to be aware of. A brief pause. I'm sorry. Mrs. Okafor is in a meeting until 5:30. Would you like her voicemail? Yes, thank you. The line clicked over. Raymond waited for the automated greeting to finish, then spoke clearly. Mrs. Okafor, my name is Raymond Cole. I have information you deserve to know regarding a personal matter. It's important, but not an emergency. My number is... He recited his cell phone slowly, then repeated it. I apologize for the cryptic nature of this message. When you call, I will be direct and honest with you. He hung up and sat back, looking at the folder's contents spread across his desk. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, email timestamps, a photograph from the hospital parking structure showing Derek's hand on Diana's back. Everything documented, everything verified, everything Paulette would need to make her own informed decisions. At 7:13 p.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? This is Paulette Okafor, returning your call. Her voice was composed but cautious. You left a message at my school? Yes. Thank you for calling back. Raymond kept his tone steady and professional. What I need to tell you is difficult, but you deserve to have this information. Are you somewhere private where you can talk? A pause. I'm in my home office. My sons are at basketball practice with their father. Raymond noticed her specification. With their father. She was alone and had privacy. Mrs. Okafor, I need to tell you that your husband has been having an affair with my wife, Diana Cole, for the past 14 months. The line went very quiet. Raymond could hear Paulette's measured breathing. I have documented evidence, he continued calmly. They've attended 3 professional conferences together. In Houston last March, Chicago in June, and Phoenix in September. They stayed at the Marquis Hotel each time, though the reservations were made under separate names. There are matching dinner receipts, room service charges, and concurrent absences from conference sessions. He heard paper rustling. She was taking notes. Her voice, when it came, was remarkably controlled. Go on. There are also regular meetings at the Riverside Hotel downtown, typically Wednesday afternoons. The pattern in credit card statements and building security logs establishes this has been consistent since last August. Raymond kept his tone matter-of-fact, presenting information without commentary. How did you discover this? Paulette asked. I was in the hospital 3 weeks ago recovering from kidney donation surgery. I gave a kidney to my mother-in-law. Diana walked into my room with Derek. Their body language made things clear. I had it investigated professionally after that. Another long silence. Then, why are you telling me this now? Because I'm filing for divorce in 2 weeks, on the 27th. The documentation will become part of public record. You deserve the chance to speak with an attorney and protect yourself before that happens. Raymond paused. I'm sorry to make this call, but I thought about what I would have wanted if someone had known while I was still unaware. Paulette's breathing had changed, still steady, but deeper. The breathing of someone absorbing impact. Thank you, she said finally, for having the decency to tell me directly. You deserved that much, Raymond replied quietly. I can email you copies of the documentation if you'd like, or have them delivered to an attorney of your choice. Email them, she said. Her voice carried the same stillness Raymond had been living with, the calm of someone whose world had just shifted completely, requiring every ounce of control to maintain composure. To this address, she recited an email carefully. Raymond wrote it down. I truly am sorry, he said again. Why? Her question was barely audible. Why tell me? Because no one told me, Raymond said simply. And you deserved better than that. After they hung up, Raymond sat in the quiet of his office. He opened his calendar and took out a red pen. The 27th. 2 weeks away. He drew a perfect circle around the date. Every piece was now in position. Raymond woke before dawn, his movements precise and unhurried in the quiet house. He'd slept well, the kind of rest that comes with complete certainty. The kitchen was dark as he measured coffee beans, the grinder's soft whir filling the space. He remembered, with perfect clarity, how Diana used to take her coffee before she started changing her order at restaurants. 2 sugars, a splash of whole milk, stirred exactly 3 times. The muscle memory was still there as he prepared it. He moved through breakfast preparation with deliberate care. Eggs over medium, wheat toast, sliced fruit arranged on the white plates they'd received as a wedding gift. The morning light began filtering through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the granite countertops he'd installed himself 3 years ago. The manila envelope sat on his desk upstairs, waiting. Inside it was the architecture of everything Diana thought she'd hidden. Linda's pristinely filed petition for dissolution of marriage, 14 months of hotel receipts and credit card statements, financial traces of the $23,400 Diana had slowly siphoned away, and that single photograph from the hospital parking structure. Derek's hand resting possessively on Diana's back, while Raymond recovered from giving her mother a kidney. He heard Diana's footsteps on the stairs, the familiar cadence of her morning routine. She appeared in the doorway wearing one of her carefully chosen work outfits, then paused, reading the deliberateness of the scene, the placed settings, the waiting coffee. "Good morning," Raymond said quietly. "Sit down." Diana moved to the table slowly, her eyes tracking between the coffee made exactly as she used to take it, and Raymond's calm face. "What's this about?" Instead of answering, Raymond reached for the envelope he'd placed on the counter. He set it in front of her with gentle precision. "Open it." Diana's manicured fingers hesitated on the clasp. Something in Raymond's stillness must have warned her, but she opened it anyway. She pulled out the contents, and Raymond watched her face move through 5 distinct expressions: confusion, recognition, denial, fear, and finally, most tellingly, calculation. "Raymond," she started, her voice taking on the persuasive tone he'd heard her use in marketing presentations. "This isn't—" He raised one hand. She stopped mid-sentence. "I know everything," he said simply. "The affair began 14 months ago. You and Derek attended 3 conferences together: Houston, Chicago, Phoenix. The Marquis Hotel each time. Though you used separate cards and check-in times, there were also the Wednesday afternoons at the Riverside Hotel downtown. Very consistent schedule." Diana's fingers tightened on the papers. Raymond continued, his voice steady. "You opened a separate credit card last July. There's an email account I didn't know about attached to it. Over 14 months, you transferred $23,400 from our joint accounts into a private account at First Regional. Small amounts, regular intervals, building a cushion for the life you were planning. He took a sip of his coffee, watching her process each revelation. Paulette knows now. I called her yesterday. She deserved to hear it directly. The Atlanta promotion you were so excited about? It's on administrative hold. There's a legitimate HR review examining preferential treatment in Derek's division. The timing is unfortunate for both of you. Diana's face had gone very still. Her coffee sat untouched, cooling in the morning light. Linda Marsh will handle all correspondence going forward. You have 30 days to vacate the house. It's in my name, as you know, and your equity contribution was minimal, especially considering the documented fund transfers. Raymond stood, picking up his keys from the counter. Eat your breakfast, he said quietly. You're going to need the energy today. Diana sat frozen at the table, surrounded by the careful documentation of every secret she thought she'd managed, every plan she thought would work. The morning sun fell across the papers, highlighting key phrases: petition for dissolution, financial misconduct, administrative review pending. Raymond paused at the door, looking back at the scene. Diana small and still at the table he'd built, the coffee growing cold beside the evidence of everything she'd thrown away. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only the clean certainty of necessary action. He left for work without another word, the door closing behind him with a soft, final click. Derek Okafor pulled into his driveway at 6:47 p.m., his mind already crafting explanations. The garage door lifted to reveal neat stacks of luggage, his expensive leather weekenders, garment bags containing his tailored suits, boxes labeled in the housekeeper's careful handwriting. He sat in his car, engine idling, staring at the precise arrangement of his extracted life. Inside, Paulette stood in their kitchen. She wore her work clothes, the vice principal's armor of pressed slacks and practical blazer. Her phone sat face up on the counter, a text conversation with his mother visible on the screen. Your mother's expecting you, Paulette said quietly. She's made up the guest room. Derek tried his practiced smile, the one that had smoothed over countless awkward moments. Let's talk about this reasonably. 14 months, Paulette cut in. Her voice carried the particular authority she used with difficult parents at school conferences. While Diana's husband was donating a kidney to her mother, you were booking hotel rooms. The Marquise in Houston, the Marquise in Chicago, the Marquise in Phoenix. Very consistent choice. Derek's smile faltered. Who told you? Raymond Cole called me yesterday. He provided dates, receipts, financial records. He was extraordinarily thorough, professional. The kind of man who builds evidence the way other men build houses. Paulette's eyes were dry, her spine straight. He said I deserved to know before everything surfaced publicly. Publicly? Something cold settled in Derek's stomach. The HR investigation into your division's promotion practices? It's expanding. Sarah Martinez filed a formal complaint this morning about being passed over for the Denver position last year. The one you gave to Tom after that golf weekend. Paulette's fingers drummed once on the counter. The timing is unfortunate. Derek's phone buzzed. Diana's number. He declined the call. I've spoken to a lawyer, Paulette continued. He's reviewing the documentation Raymond provided. The house is in my name. The boys' school accounts are separate. You should stay with your mother until we sort out the legal logistics. You're not even going to discuss this? Derek's voice rose slightly. 17 years of marriage, and you're just 17 years during which I thought I knew who I was married to. Paulette's calm cracked slightly. Do you know what Raymond said when I asked why he called? He said I deserved better than finding out the way he did. A man whose wife you helped destroy showed me more respect than you have in 14 months. Derek's phone buzzed again. Diana. Take your bags, Paulette said. Your mother's waiting." Across town, Gloria Whitfield parked her car crooked in Raymond's driveway. Her hands shook as she walked to his door. Diana had called her an hour ago, spilling out the whole truth between sharp, angry sobs. Raymond opened the door before she knocked. He looked at her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in, Gloria." She sat at his kitchen table, the one he'd built himself, the one where family dinners had felt real once. The tears started immediately. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I knew. For months, I knew. Diana told me, but made me promise. I justified it. Said it wasn't my business. Said it would hurt everyone if I spoke up. But you were in that hospital bed because of me. You gave me your kidney while she was already—" Her voice broke completely. Raymond set a glass of water in front of her. He sat quietly, waiting. "I carry part of you inside me," Gloria continued. "Every day I wake up healthy because you gave without hesitation. And I repaid that by protecting her silence. What kind of person does that make me?" "A mother," Raymond said simply. "A mother who made the wrong choice, but a mother. Will you ever forgive me?" Raymond considered this carefully. "What you do with the rest of your life is your choice, Gloria. I genuinely hope it's a good one. But that's not my business anymore." He walked her to the door as the sun was setting. She turned to say something else, but he shook his head once, gently. The door closed between them with quiet finality. Meanwhile, Diana sat in the emptying house, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Her phone showed 7 missed calls to Derek. He hadn't answered a single one. On her laptop, the HR department's administrative leave pending investigation email to Derek was still open. Everything was unraveling with the same careful precision with which Raymond had built it all. She dialed Derek's number again, straight to voicemail. The morning of the divorce hearing dawned clear and cool. Raymond adjusted his tie in the courthouse bathroom mirror, his movements precise and unhurried. Linda Marsh stood beside him, reviewing notes on her tablet, with the particular focus of someone who had already won this case on paper and was now simply making it official. "Remember," she said, not looking up, "let me handle everything. No matter what emotional arguments they try, we stay with the documents." Raymond nodded. He had learned over the past months that Linda's efficiency was its own form of compassion. She protected clients by removing emotion from the equation entirely. The courtroom felt smaller than he expected. Diana sat with her attorney, Michael Bennett, in a navy suit that Raymond had never seen before. She looked thinner, tired around the edges, in a way makeup couldn't quite hide. She didn't turn when he entered. Judge Caroline Martinez called the hearing to order with practiced efficiency. Bennett began his opening argument with carefully crafted emotion, painting Diana as a woman who had made mistakes but deserved consideration given the unprecedented stress of the marriage's final year. "Your Honor," Bennett said, leaning forward, "my client was managing her mother's illness, her own career advancement, and the emotional weight of her husband's medical sacrifice. While we acknowledge poor judgment in certain financial decisions, we ask the court to consider a more equitable distribution given these extraordinary circumstances." Linda Marsh stood, tablet in hand. "Your Honor, I have documentation that may provide relevant context for the timing Mr. Bennett references." She proceeded to lay out 14 months of evidence with surgical precision. Hotel receipts, the hidden credit card statements, bank records showing systematic transfers from joint accounts into Diana's separate account, $2,400 accumulated in small amounts, designed to avoid attention. The affair and financial misappropriation began well before Mrs. Whitfield's illness, Linda continued. In fact, the timeline shows Mrs. Cole was already engaged in both behaviors before Mr. Cole was even tested as a donor match. The judge's expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly as she reviewed the documents. "Furthermore," Linda added, "the house in question was purchased and titled solely in Mr. Cole's name prior to the marriage. Mrs. Cole's minimal equity contribution has been more than offset by documented unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts. Bennett attempted to pivot, suggesting a more generous division of retirement accounts to acknowledge the marriage's earlier years of mutual support. Linda responded by producing documentation of recent attempts to modify beneficiary designations on those same accounts. The judge reviewed everything silently. Her glasses perched low on her nose. The only sound was paper turning and Diana's carefully controlled breathing. Judge Martinez looked up, finally. Having reviewed all submitted documentation, I find Mr. Cole's petition for property division to be reasonable and supported by evidence. The house will remain solely in his possession. Joint accounts will be divided 70-30 in Mr. Cole's favor, reflecting documented misappropriation. Mrs. Cole will vacate the property within 30 days if she has not already done so. As the judge prepared to read the final rulings, Diana leaned across the table suddenly. "Raymond," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I never thought—" Raymond turned slightly, meeting her eyes with the same steady gaze he'd carried since the hospital room. "You thought exactly what you thought," he said quietly. "You just didn't think I'd find out." The judge finished reading. Raymond signed the papers first, his signature as clean and precise as everything else he'd done. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine without looking back. Terence waited on the courthouse steps, hands in his pockets. No words passed between them as they walked to the parking structure. At Raymond's car, Terence put one hand on his shoulder, a gesture that contained everything that needed saying. Raymond nodded once, 6 months unspooled like exhaled breath. Raymond's consulting practice grew steadily, 5 clients now, with 2 more in discussions. He slept through the night in his quiet house. The guest bedroom became an office, then a proper workspace as the business expanded. One Saturday morning, Raymond sat on his back porch with coffee and the latest logistics trade journal. His phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. He signed the papers yesterday. "Thank you for the call. Paulette." Raymond read it once, set the phone down, and lifted his coffee cup without responding. A year after the hearing, Raymond stood in bright afternoon sun outside another closing, his second investment property, a modest duplex with good bones and reliable tenants. He sat in his car afterward, driver's side window down, letting spring air move through. The hospital room surfaced in his mind. The mechanical hum of monitors, antiseptic smell sharp in his nose, the heavy morphine silence as he woke believing he'd poured the best of himself into something that mattered. He still believed that. What happened after didn't contaminate the giving. It only clarified who he was dealing with, and who he was. Raymond put the car in drive. He had somewhere to be. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.